old are you?
16, mate. It's none of your fucking business.
Oh, fuck.
Ah!
Oh, fuck.
Ow! And you're gonna have to drive it.
But my piano.
Are you kidding me?
What's your name?
Meg.
Is that short for Megan or?
Nah, it's short for Steve. You fucking fell asleep!
Come back! Stop!
What'd you got there? That's piano, eh?
It's a coffin.
Play something.
No.
It's a funeral. There should be music.
If they would let me
I am going
trade,
home to see my family for the first time in years,
I'd give a year for half
and
a
the prospect
day.
was giving me panic attacks.
Curled up on the sofa with you.
I'm a very grown adult man. I'm doing the rules. Wanna lift?
You're not legally allowed to drive. Have you been a mistake?
What are you, A?
Hey y'all, I'm Emily Gibson and this is Caitlin McFarlane and we are the co-founders of ATX Television Festival, now ATX TV from the couch. Welcome back to it. We fell in love with Upright as soon as we saw it and are so excited to be launching our year-round virtual screenings and conversations with this series. For those of you just joining us or watching this later, in the US you can watch Upright on Sundance Now beginning Thursday, August 6th, 2020. And we have a free 30 days for you if you look in the description or on the title cards during the presentation. If you're not in the US, be sure to check locally around the world where to find it. We promise you the search will be worth it. We try not to overhype things, as I personally fall victim to high expectations all of the time, but this one really does make us feel all the things. And right now we just really need that. This series came to ATX through E1, who originally pitched it to have it come to Austin for the festival in June. As a lot of you know, and those that don't could probably guess, we didn't have a festival in Austin this summer, but rather moved to this couch for a virtual festival. When Sundance Now got the US rights to the series, it felt appropriate for us all to come together to present it ahead of the August premiere. So we want to thank both Sundance Now and E1 for making this possible. You've been great supporters of ours in real life and now in our new reality of turning our community virtual. So let's get on with it. We couldn't be more thrilled to now host this conversation with Tim Minchin, the co-writer, executive producer, composer, and star of Upright, moderated by his friend, and I'm just going to say it, legend, Judd Apatow. So with that, let's bring them out. Tim and Judd.
Hey.
Hey guys. Hi guys. We're gonna get out of the way and let you guys start talking, but we're really excited y'all are here.
Yes, happy to be
Thank you
here.
for having me. I'm stoked.
All right. Finally, I get to grind Tim with my questions. I've waited so long for this moment. How's it going there? Where are you at this moment?
I'm in Sydney, Australia, which is, you know, we, as you know, Judd, when we met, we were living in LA, and we left LA to sort of, you know, repatriate a couple of years ago, which now feels like an incredibly good idea. So I think it's quite a lot tougher over there for you guys for lots of different reasons.
Well, we have an enormous amount of people here who don't want to wear masks. Apparently, it's very difficult for them to do that. And we're learning all sorts of horrible things about our fellow citizens. And I assume it's much easier there. What is the mask resistance level in Australia?
I reckon it would probably be quite similar, because it's not as bad over here because we haven't got as far as having such a, you know, terrible leader. But the tribalism is not just a feature of America, it's a feature of our time. And so, you know, the not wearing masks thing is just another opportunity to say, this is where I'm going to take my power off the people trying to push me around. And we've totally lost any ability to sort of see any science or truth on both sides of politics, don't you think? It's just tribal. So if you belong to the Trump train, you also don't agree with masks or climate change, and you know, on and on it goes.
Well, I think, you know, we both have a Harold Ramis connection.
Yeah.
I produced one of Harold Ramis's movies, but I also interviewed him when I was 16 years old for my high school radio station. And he was the first person that talked to me about screenwriting, and he told me that he wrote jokes for other comedians, when he was young. And I was always inspired by him. But as a person, he was someone that was an atheist and an existentialist, I guess. Would you say? Would that be the right word for that?
Yeah, totally.
And he always said, when you do not believe in God, it's up to you whether or not you want to be a good person or a bad person. It's all in your hands. And he said, I just decided to be a good person. And he saw life in very beautiful, simple ways like that. Because you worked on, you wrote Groundhog Day, and I'm sure you went deep down the well of all of those ideas that Harold cares about and you care about. Just speak to that for a moment.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting that's the sort of way you've chosen to get into this conversation, because for people who don't know, we did a stage musical version of Groundhog Day, which is might sound like a bad idea, but the reason it was a good idea for us is because although Groundhog Day is an absolute classic as a film, it's always been the premise that interests me. It's the structure, the scaffold that interests me, because it's such an amazing sort of allegory for a life to try and tell the story of, to answer this question of how are we to live. And I see Groundhog Day as a sort of humanist text, because in the end, the Phil Connors character finds his redemption or his release from what I see as basically the trap of depression, really, of being locked into one's own life and not being able to move forward, talking metaphorically sort of thing. He finds release in facing up to the truths of life. He has to eventually realize he can't control death, and that happiness is enhanced by giving to other people. But even giving to other people has its limits. It can't be performative and signaling. It has to be gentle and blah, blah, blah. And I love it as a text, because as I've got older, I've realized the things that I'm interested in. I'm not a great, even as a comedian, I'm not a great anecdotalist. I'm really interested in the question of how to live a meaningful life in a meaningless universe, which is which is a sort of more wanky way of saying what Harold was saying. If you don't believe there's a higher power or life after death or a greater calling, then what is the story you're telling? And that's why I'm so interested in Groundhog Day, and actually that's what Upright is talking about as well.
Well, I think
as well as
first of all, I literally finished it about 45 minutes ago and was just crying by myself in my room downstairs.
It's the best person to cry with, I find.
Yeah, you did such a beautiful job, and I feel like we're both interested in stories about people who are a mess, trying to figure out how they can do better, how they feel like they can learn to love, better, more openly, and how hard that is for people. The simple act of just connecting and being real with people, and that felt like it really was what this television show was all about.
I think that's right, and the reason I asked if you would do this and couldn't quite believe you said yes is because and we've only met a couple of times, but there's lots of reasons I care about your work. One is just its beautiful storytelling and structure and character. And another is when I wrote to you to ask if you'd do this for me was that I think there are many people, but you're sort of the greatest of our time, I guess, who are obsessed with finding a beautiful balance between comedy and tragedy, basically, but not in the sort of old Shakespearean sense of you murder a bunch of children and then you have a fool come out and do some jokes about piercing with swords and country matters or whatever, but actually more like a web where where every moment is funny and sad, and you don't, your work that I know is not, obviously it's comedy, but you're not restricted by an obligation to make sure every scene is silly or slapstick or whatever. And so trying to, and in telly these days, I think, I'm sure you agree, Judd, it's quite an interesting time, because in the old days, of course, you had to say, well, I'm doing a half-hour comedy and it's going to be a sitcom and it's going to be a multi-camera thing, and or I'm doing a drama and those are 1 hour long and they look like this, and they get all the money and have the good cameras, and the sitcoms are nice and cheap and cheerful and overlit and stuff. And the SVODs and all this new way we consume telly has just completely broken down those barriers between drama and comedy, and have made me very, very happy, because I'm not interested, even to the extent that people know me as a comedian. My shows tend to flip and flop and end with a little tearjerker and stuff, you know, and that allows us to, without genre restriction, explore this question. And upright, you're right, it's about how do you be a good person, but also how do you, and I think why it's salient for our times, although the main reason I think I want people to watch this during this time is because it's just got a lot of heart and a lot of comedy and a lot of adventure. And I think it's nice to watch stories that are about family and redemption and forgiveness in this time. It's not super edgy or anything, but it is a bit about how you integrate your flaws into your future, or your errors, or the bad things that have happened to you. It really is about this guy who's carrying this damage and this guilt and this completely unresolved sense of having made a mistake at a point in time that just buggered everything up, and he hasn't been able to move past that point emotionally. And then he goes on this journey across the desert, which is a nice classic, you know, backdrop for a spiritual journey that's been used since long before Christ. And he's carrying a burden, which happens to be a piano, but of course, carrying burdens, including dragging things across deserts, is a pretty old idea. And then he meets this absolute other mess of a person, and together they, you know, he has to figure out that the very fact of his fuck ups, the very fact of his damage, is why he is valuable. And that's a bit of a human journey, and I think is part of Groundhog Day, and a part of a lot of it's underneath everything we write, isn't it? How do you understand what can we get the wisdom to understand that the damage is the shit in which the future good stuff grows, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Shandling used to always talk about, you know, the Larry Sanders Show being about people who love each other, but show business gets in the way. And I always, you know, try to think about, you know, things that get in the way of love as, you know, the main, you know, story that we're all trying to tell. And, you know, I love those moments, you know, like in the first episode where, you know, he can leave and then he just doesn't. That human instinct to be a good person, you know, it's there. And it, you know, it bubbles up. And I think that's what, you know, for our world, what we want, especially right now, is for that instinct to take care of each other and to lift each other up, as opposed to living in a world which is really, you know, a lot of it's in our country, you know, people tell us it's, you know, America first, or every person for themselves, as opposed to what it should be, which is that we're all in this together, and if we don't take care of each other, we're not going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I obsess over these questions at the moment, and I just feel such deep distress. Actually, in the last month, Judd, I've felt less distressed because I've got Twitter off my phone, and that which says something about how we. I think we will look back on this time, and historians will write about it as this extraordinary time when the manner in which we talk to each other became so perfectly refined as oppositional that it kind of spilled out and broke humanity. And whether or not historians are writing about the Third World War or about this precipice we almost fell off but managed not to by some change that we made, remains to be seen. But I guess not to be too much of a wanker or to happily be too much of a wanker, during this time in Australia, and I know it's the same there when all the theatres are shut and productions are shut down, and in Australia we have a fairly sort of like blokey culture where the arts is kind of the last thing anything worries about. The government is very worried about making sure the mines stay open, and I understand that. I'm not Pollyanna-ish about the things our economy is built on, but it's trying to have this conversation about why does it matter that we don't let all the art go away right now. And really, given how oppositional it's become, given how tribal we've become, it's become more important than ever that we're telling stories and just reminding each other that actually humans, given a shared challenge and with the removal of the barriers between them, for example, the internet is a barrier and geography is a barrier and tribe, your identification of your tribe and your identity, they're all barriers. If you pull them away, if you thrust opposites into a situation as Romeo and Juliet or Lucky and Meg in our show, then their human instinct to look after one another and to eventually see through all those barriers to the core of a person will always prevail. Always. If you find the most racist, red hat wearing, person that you identify as the opposite of you, and you go and live with their family and find out about where they came from and stuff, you will find that person. Even if you disagree on everything, you will find empathy for that person. And I guess to the extent that all art is contributing to the conversation of the time, this show is sort of reminding us that we all have exactly what you said, that humanity always bubbles up.
Well, this is the discussion I have with my wife all the time when she's telling me to get off of Twitter, which is, she says that, the thing that you add to the world is not your rage-filled comments on Twitter. Instead, you tell stories that remind people to love each other and take care of each other, and that you have more effect doing that than complaining in the same way everybody else is complaining. But I always
I really
feel that this is the scary time, and at least in our country, it requires everybody to say something really bad is happening and I'm not okay with it. But I think that people are going to love the show, and it really, to me, it's like a 4-hour movie, which is my dream. I love that you can make a 4-hour movie like this, and it's also big, and there's action and adventure in it, and it looks beautiful, and I guess in a lot of ways it's the biggest palette you've had to make one of your visions, and also it's a giant acting challenge to make something like this. How did it feel for you to just take all of it on, and talk a little bit about your partner in the creation and the writing of it?
Well, so the premise wasn't mine. It was a guy called Chris Taylor, who's known in Australia as actually a member of like this comedy troupe who do a lot of pranking of politicians and satire and stuff. He's a brilliant guy. And I was actually the fourth person on board. Kate Mulvaney, who's an amazing playwright here and also a screenwriter and a really good actor, who was on The Hunters recently. Is it The Hunters?
Hunters, the Al Pacino show.
Yeah, Pacino show. She's the nun in that. She's an incredibly highly regarded actress and writer. And another writer called Leon Ford. And these are people I've known for years. And they were working on this thing with the production company always had in mind, if we get this up, Tim might do it. So I'm talking about myself in third person now. That's when you know the thing's going wrong. It's going all the way down the path of narcissism. So Tim returns from America, trailing failure. They got to me with a slightly bulked up version of Chris's premise, man with a piano drone across the desert for some reason we're not quite sure of yet. And when I came on board, I had just got back to Australia and I threw myself into it pretty hard, and we ended up writing it together and then got Matt Saville on to direct. But I mean, you know what it's like. I could talk for hours and boringly about the process of making this thing. It's all on location. A lot of it's in some pretty tough parts of Australia. But do you know what the thing that I love the writing of it, I love the storyboarding. I imagine you probably agree, in the end, the greatest joy of these projects is those moments when you're sitting in the room making up the world from nothing. Yeah. Actually, everything after that is like just trying to see that vision through.
Yeah.
So I loved that writing process, the push-pull of story, and but maybe this, but maybe that, and discovering the inner world of these characters as a writer. But when we got the scripts done, I kind of went, okay, I think that's it. And everyone, the commissioner's ready to go. And I suddenly went, oh no, we've written a thing where I, a 42-year-old man or whatever I was, am going to have to spend 10 weeks filming with a teenage girl stuck in a ute. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be like, I'm not going to have anything to say to her. It's a big role. It's the biggest role for a kid that age that I've ever seen in Australian film and telly. And I thought, I mean, the kid's going to need a chaperone, and we're going to need, and then I met Milly, and I just went, oh, this might not be so bad. And actually the story of the making of Upright, apart from the crew just being incredible and just no egos and just hard graft, is the story of the fact that I got to fall in love with Milly like Lucky fell in love with Meg, because I was very careful to let Milly find me. I mean, there's nothing worse than a 42-year-old bloke like trying to become chummy with, I just sort of kept it really cool. And she's incredibly independent, didn't even have a mum or anything. She just did the work. And we slowly, like it was a bit like the journey that the characters go through. It wasn't until like week 7 that we kind of, we really love each other. We didn't clash at all. We just kind of did the work, and we filmed it quite chronologically. So the thing was a joy. And then for various reasons, I ended up very heavily involved in post, in edit, and in talking to, I didn't write the score. That's not really my thing, but I was obviously very all over that because music is what the show's about at its sort of heart at a level. And it was really great, Judd. And as you say, it is a single story arc. It does have an ending. It is just an episodic film. And there's something really satisfying about that, about going, how do we tie this up emotionally and make people feel the way you felt an hour ago? Get them all sobby. Don't let them off the hook. Don't let them off the hook, and don't let them sit there thinking, oh, I wonder what season 2 is going to be like. Whether or not there's a season 2, I just want it to sit on people's hearts, like a calcification of plaque.
Yeah. Well, she's amazing. I mean, it is always wonderful when you find somebody like that, where, 90 seconds into the episode, you feel like, oh, I'm just watching a mega star here. This is one of these people that I will now see for the next 50 years in all sorts of things. And her timing is ridiculous. She's so natural but funny and hitting all these rhythms, and she's emotional. And it always reminds me of when over the years we would meet certain people and cast people in our projects, and we had that feeling like, oh my god, this is one of those people.
Like, just do it.
Like Adam Driver or Linda Cardellini. We used to sit and watch Linda Cardellini, and we'd watch the dailies of Freaks and Geeks, and we would be like, every take is good. Every moment is good. Like, we could pick something, but it's all good. And that's what this young woman is like. It's really fun to watch that, because it feels like she's been around a long time. Like, in watching her, you have a feeling like, is this her 50th thing? And clearly it's one of her first things.
Yeah, she'd done little bits, and she's not a stage kid. She went to a school down here that is a creative arts school, but she's not stagey. She doesn't do theatre. It's not really her thing. she came to it reasonably late. I mean, she's playing younger than she is. She has there's stuff in the story that, you know, she has a lot in common with her character. Not that it's the same stuff, and not that it's any of our business, but she's had a bit of tough stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing, you know, you want to, especially as a kind of middle class, you know, I'm the son of a surgeon, and I you know, we were brought up pretty reasonably strict and no nonsense, but I certainly haven't had any suffering. And it's taken me till this age really to be taken seriously at all as an actor. In fact, I've basically had to write myself jobs because you know, why cast this? But
that's the advice I've given everyone I've ever worked with, is like, write your own job. It's the only way a lot of this great stuff happens, is
well,
you know
the King
yourself,
of Staten
you know?
Island. Yeah, that, I mean, your last film, it's a perfect example of why, I mean, he has an extraordinary life, but why you just have to write your own story. And so much of what I didn't realize, that as someone who's had a boring upbringing, as far as I'm concerned, given a scaffold like Upright, you can bring everything, and you do. And I've always said that about my theatre, and I've always said, when people ask advice, I say, take everything you are into everything you do, you know. And it doesn't matter how boring you think your life is, there's all this stuff there that you can just grab and maybe hyperbolize, but as an actor, I've always thought it's a sort of pretending job, and you have to grab onto feelings that you know and translate them into something else. But Milly, as you say, it feels like she's been around forever, and I'm desperate. You know, I feel very protective of her, as I'm sure you have that feeling of when you find someone young, you're like, okay, don't, you know, when she came to LA earlier in the year before everything kicked off, and I'm like, fine, but tell me what agents you're meeting, and don't take the first job, and don't sign up for 7 years on a network show. And I just want to hold her. And more than anything, I want her not to be too successful when she's young, because that just fucks you up. And I want for her a few years of not quite breaking out in America, but who knows what'll happen.
Well, there's a documentary on HBO called Showbiz Kids about all these child stars and how it affected them. And, you know, if you don't really have the healthiest supportive environment, it is scary. And when I worked with all the kids on Freaks and Geeks, and I always felt like, wow, some of these kids didn't even go to college because of this show. Like, they chose this over college, and I felt a great responsibility to
Milly pulled out
lives.
Milly pulled out her final year of high school to do this job. I mean, she wasn't really liking it, and she's super bright, and she reads books like made of paper, and but she's an autodidact in every way, really. And I just want her to, I don't think she's one of those people that needs reminding that actually you're only as valuable as your brain. You know, that's what I tell my kids. If you've got a brain full of powerful thoughts, and you're able to take in information and pass that information and interpret it, and that's power, you know. And unfortunately, these kids who get famous young, they stop having to grapple with complex input. They start just becoming they de-skill us. I mean, even me, I didn't get any attention till I was 30, but the process of being de-skilled by people who really just like, the more useless he is, the more money we'll all make. So make sure he doesn't know how to book a car anymore, you know. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. I'd love to have that conversation because my kids, my daughter, like your daughter, seems to want to act, and I'm like, okay.
Well, I always say, as you know, the work is very hard, and so people don't understand how much you have to put into it. And the reason why most people don't do it is, as a writer, most people don't want to get up every day and sit alone in a room for hours and hours. It's very hard. It's hard to accept a lot of rejection.
Year after year of no affirmation, no one giving you a paycheck, no one saying thank you for doing a good job. You're just floating in self-loathing and self-love.
and most people don't get work, and so it's you're really believing in yourself to take the risk to have a a career like that, and you know, when you talk about, you know, putting, you know, your life into the work, you know, I know that you were disappointed that your DreamWorks animated film, you know, fell through when Universal bought DreamWorks Animation, and you know, it reminded me of Freaks and Geeks, where every second we made it, we knew they were going to cancel us at any moment. And
it's a famous.
I had back surgery because I herniated discs from the tension, and I was just suffering. And then at some point, I think as artists, if we, you know, can handle it all, we put that into the next thing, that feeling. And I think so much of your performance as somebody who is disappointed in their music career not continuing and not feeling like he's where he should be, did you feel like you were able to use some of that energy of that project not working out and just put it into the feelings of this character?
Without a doubt. And I know it's so spoiled, but you know, I put 4 years of my life into that bloody film, and I felt so angry that someone could take that time off me. And without a doubt, Upright is the most overt, it is the most overt example of someone taking their stuff and putting it into a show. I mean, Lucky says at the end, you know, when you make mistakes, sometimes you make something beautiful, which is a true thing for a composer like me who, because I don't read dots or anything, often I'm just fiddling and I go, oops. And so that metaphor of your errors sometimes being the greatest thing that ever happened to you, which is obviously very explicit in Upright. The whole of Upright is about how do you take those the things that your setbacks and contextualize them in the narrative of your life, and all that stuff about coming home. I had lived away from Australia, my wife and I, for 12 years, and our kids have been born overseas, and we're from Perth. And this sense of home and of that ocean and what it means to come back to the west coast of Australia and all that family. And for me, just the idea of, I've always been very close to my family, and my exile had been self-exile because I wanted a bigger career, and my wife and I wanted a bigger adventure. But it wasn't a big thing for me to go, imagine if that exile was involuntary, or it was self-exile based on just guilt, on having made a mistake. And that doesn't take much to be sitting there typing, crying. You know, like it doesn't take a big adjust, and that's why creativity is so extraordinary. You're taking all your crap into it, and Upright has everything. It has that sense of, and also I turned 40, and that sense of like, oh shit, I'm not the young kid. I'm not like, wow, he's written a musical and he's only, you know, that's all gone. I'm now this sort of crusty old guy, and I'm carrying a bit, and to be honest, after that American experience, for lots of reasons, I was experiencing for the first time in my life what I now think was probably a period of depression, you know, not chemical depression, but I was really down, and I got to stick that downness into this guy, and in doing so made the thing I'm most proud of in my whole life, or helped make it with a lot of amazing people. And in doing so, healed the whole thing. I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to turn your shit into a show that other people will laugh and cry at. I mean, what a absolute, I mean, who gets to have a job like that?
Well, I think, you know, one of the great things about being a comedian and working in comedy or storytelling is when bad things happen to you, there's a little part of your mind that goes, this is a good joke. Or this is a good story. Like, you know, when my wife and I were in the hospital and we were having, you know, our second child, and the doctor was just mean to us. And it was weird. Like, the doctor was vicious to us. But there's a little part of my brain like, this is going to be funny. If we get through this night, man. this is going to be a movie or a joke or something.
You feel like saying to him, you can be as mean as you like. I'm turning you into material, motherfucker. There's nothing
I'm going to monetize this shit.
That's right. Keep it coming, mate. You're making me richer.
Your cruelty is going to pay for my mortgage.
It's really good.
Also, how is it for you just writing the comedy of the series? Because it's also very funny. I mean, you and Milly are like an old time comedy team. There's long,
it's
you know,
a odd
talky
couple.
sections, and then there's like a ton of physical comedy and fights and running around. And how is that for you? Just trying to make it comedically what you wanted it to be.
Yeah, well, our writers' room had, you know, everyone in the writers' room have really great skills at doing both, at the balance. But you know, Chris Taylor, whose idea it was, is probably was the one going, we're losing the funny, and pushing. And he and I, even though I come from a comedy background, I'm really, you know, Matilda is more who I really am. I'm looking for little moments of silent gold, and I'm not that. I don't really self-identify as a comedy guy. I don't feel like that. But obviously, I somehow, I don't know. I'm just a not funny guy with a funny head, I think. But I love that push-pull. And I mean, I don't think I have the esteem to handle any criticism from you, but I would, on some level, be interested in knowing where you think it stumbled too far into silly or whatever. Not in this chat, maybe some other time. But you know, you do go. How far can you push out? And the answer, can you go almost slapstick and absolutely break down with grief sincere, clawing at the pavement sincere? And you do. But there are certain types of comedy that break the contract with the audience, where they no longer feel like you're an authentic character, that you're actually a person doing a bit in front of the character. And I think people in film and telly make that mistake. I'm quite critical of that. I spot it and go, okay, now you're doing a bit. I no longer believe the character's real. So if you're going to turn around and cry on me, I'm going to be like, yeah, nice. Yeah, that's fraudulent. But what I learned with Upright is I think actually there are some pretty wacky bits. And when it's episodic, you can afford for one ep to be a little bit more pushed. And then you can manipulate the audience. The audience will go with you as long as you're always telling a truth, you know. And I actually think what I learned is, and my next one, which I'm sort of starting to work on, is that you can probably push harder. And I think you do. I think you get more proper laughs and go all the way to proper profundity. I was worried that because the show was dark and it all relied on this moment in Ep 8 when that person walks into the room, not to give any spoilers if anyone hasn't watched it, it all needs that moment when that little thing walks into the room, and that needs to just go boosh. And if you've done anything that breaks the capacity for that to be utterly profound, you know, when I was doing animated stuff with, you know, talking to Katzenberg, he'd come in and go, you know, why isn't this more fun? And the animated film was about a little guy who was a bilby, a hopping animal, who was scared to take a leap, you know. And I kept saying, and maybe this is why my movie got shut down because I'm too literal, I kept saying, if your third act moment, if your hero moment, if your denouement is a guy taking a leap, then we have to have believed all along that if they fall off a cliff, they'll die. That if they get punched, it hurts. And even though we're in an animation world, we have to have gravity and we have to have pain, because otherwise, if your denouement is exploding a planet, then fine. But if it's taking a jump off a high thing, then you have to, anyway. So this is the stuff I obsess over. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
am I right?
I always think that how I like the rules in my head when I think about it. I usually think, always remember that in life, people are nuts. Like, people are weird. People are broad. Things. And that you can have credibility and authenticity if you just portray that accurately. You know, people will beat the shit out of you. People will walk into a Walmart, and if you say wear a mask, they will lose their minds and trash the place. And so I always think that's the rule. Like, people can be broad and weird, but are they broad and weird with the rules of their mind and the way life works? And I thought you did a great job with it, and that the funny sequences were very funny and didn't, you know, get into the area. We always call it sweaty. You know, like when I'm editing my stuff, I always go, that feels a little sweaty. Like you could feel I'm trying too hard. Or
we say on the nose,
I'm reaching for a joke. You know, it's funny, in the Larry Sanders Writers Room, we would joke about the phrases in comedy, the terminology. You know, like that's a hat on a hat. You know, like a joke on a joke.
A hat on a hat,
And the one that I made up at the time, I made it up as a joke, but it's kind of a funny one, as I used to say, it's a turd in a slipper, which means a joke that feels right, but isn't.
Okay, I'm totally stealing that. Yeah.
But it is about, you know, is it authentic, and do you believe this is how they would feel about each other? And I thought, you know, my heart was with it the whole time, and I know that you just showed 2 episodes to everyone, so I don't want to give away anything that happens later, because there's so many twists and turns, and it evolves in such a unique,
and what I love is
way.
and what's perhaps, you know, just talking about the Disney playbook and storytelling and stuff, and I suppose we have to end this chat at some point, is that Upright breaks the Disney rule, which is you set up a character or two, a protagonist or two, and you give them a challenge, you give them a want, right? Certainly in musicals, you're meant to say, you know, in the first act, the protagonist in the first 15 minutes sings a song, this is what I need, you know, where is love or whatever. And in Upright, you get to the end of the first episode and you really only have the slightest hints, not only of what they want, you just know the guy's got to get his piano back and his mum's dying. You don't know why. You don't know anything about her. You get the sense that there's some stuff in the past, but really, at the end of the first 27 minutes, you've got these 2 characters that hopefully the viewer goes, I want to stick with these guys and see what happens, because they are really odd couple. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's got a tone we like. And that continues, and you don't actually find out what the Lucky wants until 2 minutes into, at the very end of episode 7, but you don't really get it until 10 minutes into the final episode. And so the whole thing, using flashback and stuff, is an unraveling of a mystery. Who are these people and what do they want? And I am probably most proud of the team for having the balls to do that, you know, to trust the audience. And for those people watching this who have just watched 2 eps, I understand that it's probably a little slow for some people in the modern way of making telly. And I just want to make work that trusts the audience to stick with us and stuff. Just spruiking other stuff. I'm putting an album out as well, and all the songs on it are like 5-6 minutes long, and they're all stories. And I just think, fine, that might mean I lose half my potential audience, but I'm just not interested in feeding the audience bubblegum for the first 30 minutes to try and trap them. And so much stuff these days I watch, they've blown all their tricks by the 15th minute, and the rest is just watching an inevitability play out, you know. So
well, you're talking to the guy who likes length here, Tim. You know,
I know. And
I mean, I remember James Brooks said, you know, when your movie is a certain length, you're telling the audience that they're worth your time. And I always thought that was true. And I also think it just takes time to get to know people. I mean, it's you know, I think one of the great things about being able to do, you know, an 8-part miniseries basically, is how deep you get to go, and you can't do that in 90 minutes or 2 hours. And you develop such a relationship with these people. What was the reaction like in Australia?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's on a paid channel here that is. So your potential audience is tiny in American numbers, but it couldn't have gone better critically. It's been, and it was a co-production with Sky Atlantic UK actually. So again, it's on a pay channel, a cable channel in the UK, and so again, the numbers. We're about to release it digitally here, so other people will be able to watch it, which I can't wait for. But really, really, really good. I just and I think to that length and the sort of pace and and to the Brooks quote, you are saying to the audience, trust us, this will be worth. And with Upright, the harder, I mean, I don't suppose in your busy schedule you have your will, but if you watch it again, there's all this stuff, you know, that is all planted that you'll go, it was there all along, you know. That Upright doesn't only reward sticking with it, but I promise you, at the risk of sounding very highfalutin, it rewards concentration and focus. And I feel confident that not many people get to Ep8 of Upright and go, I wish I didn't bother with, you know, sometimes spending 4 hours on an arc and letting the characters develop in more sort of realistic time and letting the audience discover the characters as they discover each other. If you do your job right, I find it the most satisfying sort of viewing experience. And certainly the feedback we've got from the UK and Australia is it's great. And look, finding a home for it in the US hasn't been easy. It's a weird time, you know, and these, you know, Netflix and Hulu and stuff, they all have particular things they're looking for to fill holes that they perceive there. And
they all have theories now. They have theories.
They have theories, man, and they have theories based on pseudoscience. But it's so great that Sundance Now have bought it because they don't buy shit. You know, it's a little badge of honor, and actually, I think it will find a really great audience there. But I also don't want to make people think it's an art house piece. It is a rollicking. It's hilarious, and there's shit happening all the time. Yeah,
you know, if you can make me laugh hard and cry hard, that's my favorite thing in the world. And I can tell you a funny connection, which is, you know, when you say, you know, you have to locate a partner that understands what you did to find a home like Sundance, that the person that's in charge of all of those networks is Dan McDermott. And Dan was my executive on Freaks and Geeks, who worked for DreamWorks at the time. And he was the big proponent who fought to make Freaks and Geeks. And apparently,
so he's still got impeccable taste all these years later. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, well, send him my love, will you?
Yes. And so anyway, I guess we should end it here. But I think it's beautiful work. I really enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed avoiding my family for 4 hours to do it. They needed things too. They needed stuff, and I was like, no, I've got work to do for Tim. And I was having the best time, and I'm excited for everybody to see it. And we didn't get into all the other stuff, you know, the joy you brought me with you know, doing stand up together at Largo in Los Angeles, and Matilda. But you know, you're so great.
Have other
I was thrilled to do this.
Thank you, Judd. It means a huge amount that you gave me that time. 4 hours plus listening to me rambling on about it. It's a pretty heavy commitment. I owe you hard. Thank you, mate.
Yeah. All right, of course. Take care. All right, everybody out there, be well. Take care of each other. We'll see you soon.
Wear masks. Watch telly.
Exactly.